Greetings to all. We would like to thank you for joining us for the 29th edition of the Annual Investment Meeting webinar series. Today, we are presenting Building Back Better, Leveraging Women-Owned SMEs for Economic Growth. My name is Karen Pizon, Investor Relations for AIM, and I'll be your MC for today. The Annual Investment Meeting is the largest investment platform in the world. An initiative of the UAE Ministry of Economy, AIM has been promoting a healthier global economy by linking investment opportunities to fast-growing economies under 6 key pillars: foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, small and medium enterprise, startups, and future cities, with a special event, One Belt, One Road. We would like to thank our multilateral partner, Islamic Corporation for the Development of the Private Sector, for sponsoring today's webinar. This webinar is also sponsored by Etihad Credit Insurance, the UAE's federal export credit company. Etihad Credit Insurance provides solutions guaranteed to help UAE exporters and businesses navigate through this difficult time. To find out more about EZI offerings, please email info@ezi.go.ae. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. If you experience any issues with your audio or video during the webinar, just refresh your browser and that should take care of everything. We would suggest using Chrome, Firefox, or Opera. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you like a specific question, vote for it under the question tab so we can address it to our speakers. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we are running live polls located beside the question tab. So we request you all to please participate by casting your votes. In today's webinar, our experts will discuss the case for inclusive growth through women-owned SMEs and how best to support women-owned SMEs with a focus on access to markets and finance. Subject matter experts will present best practice examples of gender-inclusive sourcing and finance. I would now like to introduce the keynote speaker and the moderator for today's webinar, Ms. Elizabeth Vasquez, who is the CEO and co-founder of WeConnect International. She is a world leader in women's economic empowerment and global supplier diversity and inclusion. She is the co-author of the book, Buying for Impact: How to Buy from Women and Change Our World. As the head of WeConnect International, she is responsible for mission delivery, including support for women business owners based in over 120 countries and member buyers representing over $1 trillion in annual purchasing power. After her keynote speech, she will be joined by a panel of experts. And without further ado, we'll turn the time over to our wonderful speakers. And please, Ms. Elizabeth, come on stage.
Thank you so much, Karen, for the introduction. I am just honored to be a part of this conversation with some leading experts, ambassador from the US, a corporate executive who's been doing this longer than most, and some outstanding women business owners. I'm thrilled that the Ministry for the Economy is leading on this and that AIM is bringing us all together to have a conversation about how to build back better, how to leverage women-owned SMEs to help grow the economy. On the next slide, just a quick overview, you'll see that unfortunately today, women-owned businesses, this is people that represent half the world's population and about a third of the world's private businesses, earn only about 1% of the spend by large corporations and governments around the world. So women, while they are increasingly owning and growing businesses, they unfortunately are basically invisible in global value chains. And that's not a good number if we want to grow the economy and create jobs at this particular moment in time. On the next slide, you'll see that there are many corporations that are leading this effort. They created this nonprofit, We Connect International, because they believe there is a business case for buying more products and services from women-owned businesses. And we do hope that in the future, there will be many more UAE-based corporations that are leading this effort. And I'm certain that that will happen. On the next slide, you'll see that women in the UAE, according to the Ministry of Finance, make up 70% of university graduates. So they're really smart and they're really talented, and they make up almost half of the workforce at 46.6% and 10% of the leadership within private sector companies. And so that number is also growing. And according to ArabNet and Dubai SME, local investments in teams with at least one female founder equaled a quarter of all the deal flow in 2018. So that's very encouraging that we're seeing more women founders as part of the teams that are going after and winning investments. Now, the UAE has stated very publicly that it intends to become one of the top 25 countries for gender equality. And I know that that is possible if we all work together, and that's the purpose of this conversation today. On the next slide, you'll see that there is a way for organizations to find women-owned businesses and to know that they are women-owned businesses. There's a certification that we apply to ensure that a business is at least 51% owned by one or more women, that it's managed by women, controlled by women, and independent. And this helps to ensure that if we're going to go out of our way to buy from both men-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, that we know where to find these women suppliers and that they are in fact owned by women. And that's because of the way women spend their money. They tend to spend more of it on their families and their communities, both men and women, boys and girls. And so everyone benefits. On the next slide, you'll see that this is something that is a type of movement. We already have women self-registered for free in 120 countries, but we can also certify with local partners in almost 60% of the world's population. And these are the countries where we can right now certify that these are women-owned businesses and they're in a searchable database. What's unfortunate, as you'll see, is there are almost no countries in the Middle East that are participating in these opportunities. And so we need to change that, because the women in the UAE and in the region in general are truly outstanding. And we all need to benefit from their innovation, their passion, their ability to create jobs, and their leadership. On the next slide, you'll see that women are looking for a community. They want to work with other women business owners, and they also want to be found by buyers, qualified buyers that are committed to giving them an equal opportunity to compete and to win business. We offer education. There's an academy. There's a lot of free training for women business owners. There's a lot of networking where you bring together buyers and sellers, events and matchmakers. And then, of course, intelligence. You know, what are the buyers looking for, and how can women-owned businesses anticipate the needs of those buyers? And we also want to make sure that it's easy for buyers and sellers to find each other. We want to make sure that there's a searchable database that everyone can use to find each other and to connect. So on the next slide, you'll see that there is a business case for why corporations like IBM do this. Yes, it has great social impact, but the truth is these corporations want to mirror their customer base and their employee base. They want to support their clients that are looking for more inclusion. Increasingly, governments are looking for inclusive economic growth. They want to support business growth. They want to look for innovation that they don't right now have access to if women aren't knocking on their doors. They might have local or national content requirements. They want to improve costs through increased competitiveness in their supply chain. They want to have local knowledge and local networks, and they want to, of course, enhance their brand with local communities. So these are just some of the highlights for the business case of why buyers are seeking women-owned suppliers. On the next slide is just some contact information, but more importantly, I think now is the opportunity for me to get to turn it over to the experts to talk about, how does their organization support women-owned businesses, and what are the challenges to the success in the UAE. So at this time, I would love to turn it over to our first expert. He is a true champion with deep passion for inclusion. Ambassador Rokolta is absolutely, documenting in various articles and hosting various events ways to bring everyone together, to increase trade, to increase business, both in the UAE and also between the UAE, the United States, and throughout the region. So Ambassador, thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk with us and to share your vision for women as business owners. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the work that you're doing in this space.
Well, good morning and good evening to everyone. The amazing thing about Zoom and similar platforms is we get to be connected all around the world. So I'm very happy to be here this day. And so first, let me start out by saying that in order for us to really move the women movement, we need authentic leaders, people who absolutely believe that this is not only the right thing to do, we need to balance the resources of society across all spectrums. And we also have to take advantage of the fact that we have a real talent shortage in the world today. Education is, of course, a big part of that, but giving women the opportunity to compete equally and fairly with men can do nothing but bring more prosperity to the world at large. In addition to it's fair, it's equal, and there is a really strong business case for this kind of diversity, which I won't go into. I've got 3 minutes to speak, and I thought that I would talk just a little bit about a couple of the things that we did that we found to be very, very successful, and that was mentoring and joint venture. When you think about a large customer, a buyer, and the large spends that they have, we need to find really good partners who want to move this ball forward. And in the case of our company back in the United States when I was in business, we found that in the auto industry, in the Toyotas, the General Motors, the Fords of the world, who understood the need and actually committed to a percentage of their spend on an annual basis for women and other diverse kind of companies. And so the way we handled it was to form joint ventures with women-owned businesses. They were in charge. They owned more than 50% of the joint venture, in some cases 51, others 60. And we provided, as a company, we did exactly the same thing. But what we provided was the experience, the processes, sometimes the capital, the systems, the know-how on how to actually go about and produce significant added value for our customer together. And these relationships have blossomed into wide-ranging efforts. In some cases, our partners have gone off on their own and become very, very successful, no longer needing a mentor. And I think that matriculation is a very, very important part to establishing an overall ecosystem where women begin to emerge and you start to change that 1% to 5 and 10 and 15. I will also say that we really need this certification. We don't, fronts, as what we call them in the United States, are something that are damaging to the process and to the effort. We also need to do better in organizing all this networking that you're speaking of. And I believe that finally, we need to measure. We need to measure success in real metrics. And they need to be measured on at least a half-year basis. I prefer quarterly. Goals must be set. And I'll leave you with this final thought, and that is that when I spoke initially about authentic leadership, you need to have support from the very, very top of the company. We do need to engage everyone, but with support from the very top, measuring on a quarterly basis, having established goals, making sure that we meet those goals is the way to go forward. And that's how we've achieved success in our 20-year journey along this pathway. I'll turn it back over to you. Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Thank you, Ambassador. You have to love technology, right? But it is amazing that we're all able to come together, whether we're in the UAE or in the US, to have this important conversation. And we're so grateful for your leadership in this particular area. It's just one of many areas that you're working on, but the time that you're personally taking to ensure that there is equal opportunity is really wonderful to observe and to get to listen to. So thank you. Speaking of wonderful leaders with deep commitment and passion for inclusion, it is my honor to introduce to all of you the head of Global Supplier Diversity and Inclusion for IBM, Michael K. Robinson. Michael is unable to join us via video, but he is joining us via audio while on the road. And I know that we will all enjoy hearing from Michael and his experience from a corporate perspective. So Michael, let me turn it over to you.
Well, and hopefully everyone can hear me now. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It is my extreme pleasure to participate in this program. And as Elizabeth mentioned, technology is a wonderful item. It allows us to communicate throughout the world, but at the same time, there may be issues with technology, such as I'm not able to be on video. But as a business, the thing that it teaches us, we have to pivot. You have to adjust to the situation that you're in and continue to move forward. And that's something corporations and WBEs have to do also. And I'll just give you an overview of our program. IBM's program has been in effect from a supply diversity standpoint since 1968. And IBM is one of the founding corporate members of We Connect International. And as Elizabeth mentioned, we found it essential because our program started in 1968 in the U.S., and we had been working with women-owned and minority-owned businesses in the U.S., and we understood the value that they brought to us. We understood the value from a customer sat. We understood the value from a responsiveness, that women-owned and diverse suppliers were responsive. They helped us with innovation. So what we decided to do right around the turn of the century in 2002, 2003, we took our program global. And as soon as an organization such as We Connect was developed, we understood the value that it would bring, and we have been a part of We Connect globally since its inception. I would mention to all of the women-owned businesses who are listening, reach out to We Connect, understand the value that they bring, understand how they can not only connect you with with corporations, but more importantly, how they can connect you with other women-owned businesses. And that is an area of opportunity I think businesses forget doing WBE to WBE. And I'll say from a corporate standpoint, as you are engaging with corporations, you heard the ambassador and you heard Elizabeth speak to the fact that the corporations are looking for WBEs and diverse-owned businesses from some of the programs, and IBM has a mentoring program. The things that we do and we've learned, a key factor that you have to have is access for diverse-owned businesses. IBM operates in 170 plus countries, and in every country in which we operate, we have a policy or process that ensures that women-owned and diverse-owned businesses if they can provide value add to our supply chain, they are given the opportunity to participate in the supply chain. And just as the ambassador was talking about from a mentoring standpoint and a measuring standpoint, we have KPIs or our key metrics that we measure on a monthly basis that are presented to our chief procurement officer, and supplier diversity is one of those metrics that we look at spend. We look at what we're doing from a developmental standpoint. So we are actively involved and we're monitoring, and we want to ensure that we're given that opportunity. Now, from a WBE standpoint or a supplier standpoint, the thing that I would tell each and every one of you is know your customer. There is so much information that you can get off of the web today. Understand who your customer is. Understand if your product or your service can fit into their supply chain. Also understand that everybody is not your customer. And when you meet a corporation, you have a very few moments to be able to articulate, here is my company. Here's what my company does. Here's my product or my service. Here's how my product and my service can fit into your supply chain. And here's the value add that I can bring to your supply chain. And be specific, because not every company can do everything. And when you're asked a question, what can you do? Please do not say everything. No one company can do everything. So be precise, be specific, and tell what's the value add that you can bring. And as the ambassador said, I know I only have a few moments, so I will turn it back over to you, Elizabeth, but hopefully this provided some input and some information to those who are listening today.
Thank you so much, Michael. I always appreciate your words of wisdom and always learn from you. So grateful you could participate. And now to Dr. Bader, who's the CEO of Envision Partnership, and really an outstanding woman in business who shares her experience with audiences all over the world. So Dr. Bader, if I could please turn to you for some insights about your business and challenges and opportunities you see in the UAE. Dr. Bader?
Hi. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for this opportunity. Yes, we need more people like yourself, like Michael, like Mr. Ambassador, to support us here in the MENA region. When I started myself in executive search, and actually until now, I'm the only woman that owns and lead executive search in the MENA region. So it's been really challenging to be kind of rubbing shoulders with kind of male pale dominant in a way sector. However, there are so many lessons that I've learned along the way, and one of the most important one that drive our business actually to be catering specifically to place, to find, to search, to develop, and to promote female leadership in the region. And this is what we have been doing for the last couple of decades. And finally, last year, we were able to achieve 50%. So we've been trying over the clients and try to convince them about having more diversified shortlist. Let us just show you what are the capacity that we can have in the region, because we do have a perception that in our part of the world, women are not so courageous or risk taker to be responsible for commercial roles, leadership roles, P&L. And we tried so hard to shake this perception and try to prove this perception wrong by action. And we were very lucky to have engaged with remarkable female leaders that we were able to place in Fortune 500 companies and others. And accompany them during their journey, gave us the learning about the pains and the strength and the challenges that they have been facing. And coming back to our clients with this feedback to enable us to work together on a better format that can have more diversity and inclusion. Because sometimes we do a good job in terms of the numbers, but we don't do a good job in terms of inclusion. And this is where it's really an equally important issue that we work very closely with clients to try to ensure that we are working on that aspects, and we do have the right medium to enable women to flourish, to contribute, to voice, their ideas, etc. And also try to come to the conclusion together with clients about the do and don'ts, what will work in terms of having more inclusive environment and what wouldn't work, and how can we overcome these obstacles through what we know and through what will come along and we don't know, like for example what we have now with pandemic globally. So I always say female leaders do exist globally and also in our region, but we need to dig hard and make an effort to find them, not just surface the first layer that we find and that's it. And I always say we don't do miracles. If they exist, we will find them. If they don't exist, we will develop them. And this is what we have been doing, working hand in hand with females with potential that have the passion to develop their career and then lead the way together into developing this pipeline that we can offer to clients.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Bader. You're such a wonderful role model for all of us, and we're very lucky to have you in the We Connect International Network. So much more to learn, and I have some more questions for you. I'll come back to you. For now, I did want to know that did want to find out from the ambassador, what's your vision for the role and the potential of women-owned businesses in the, not just the UAE, I think in the region in general, but the opportunities to access US markets and other markets.
I have to go. Keith, I have to get back on the call. Bye.
I think we're good. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Ambassador. I know you're super busy, and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to ask your opinion of what are some of the next steps. What's your sort of vision for the role of women in the UAE, trade opportunities with the US? Would love to know, especially in the midst of COVID, where women are, who own businesses, desperate to keep the doors open, keep people employed, find ways to deliver their products and services. What are your thoughts on next steps?
I think there's two next steps. I think we have to continue to organize. So far, all we've been doing is networking and presenting our case. And we've been warmly received by the Emirati government, by industry leaders, and there's an enormous amount of excitement from women. But the next step is now to go to that next process, and that is to begin what I call the long and arduous road of finding opportunities. We need to find value for these companies, contracts, if you will, and we need to find whether they're ministries or other companies that will do what similarly was done in the United States, and each company pledge that a certain small percentage, and this would be just a goal, it wouldn't be a mandatory set aside, that 1 or 2% of their annual spend would be a goal to begin to award to women businesses. And this is where I think that these kind of joint ventures are very, very important. If it were up to me, I would try to partner with the chambers, which have 1,500 basically male-dominated companies, and see if we could get a few of them to enter into some kind of mentorship program. Yes, it means giving up a little bit of the revenue, but I think that the long-term rewards in terms of expansion of the economy, of access for women to be able to participate in a greater role, the use of talent, which is in great shortage, especially good talent, and you have to believe that of the initial interest by women-owned businesses, these are the brightest and the best, the most forward-leaning, and that's the hard part to do. That authentic leadership that say, look, I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of perhaps what be my volume of business in order to promote a women-owned business, because I know in the end of the day that'll create even more value for me, the majority company. So I think that that's actually the next step. Not everybody agrees with my vision. Some people prefer to do it a little bit differently, and that's okay, because I think the space is big enough for a lot of different initiatives across the board.
Thank you, Ambassador. I love your emphasis on public-private partnerships, working with civil society to try something, right? Let's not allow this crisis to keep us from moving forward. There are many opportunities that this creates. In fact, we did a survey of women-owned businesses in all these different countries, and they're innovating. They're using this as an opportunity to develop new products and services, to leverage technology, to do their work, to come up with new ways of creating efficiencies. And so I love your vision for how do we move forward and become even stronger going forward by relying on the strength of each other. So thank you for sharing that vision of the role of chambers, of the roles of government, of the private sector, setting goals. I would love to actually turn that question over to Michael. You have been doing this for many years now. And so how do we begin to set baselines and goals and be more inclusive in how we spend our money? Michael?
Yes. Yes. What I would say is, and I will follow on from some of the comments that you made, Elizabeth, and some of the comments from the ambassador. From a corporate standpoint, I think each and every corporation has to be aware of, I'll say and I'll look at it two ways. Number one is social responsibility. From the standpoint of, are we serving and representing the communities in which our organizations are a part of? But you have to look at it from the other part also, from the standpoint of looking for innovation, looking for technology. And in order to be the best, you have to utilize the best. And if you are a B2B, and IBM is a B2B, we want to make sure that we are seeking those companies who can provide us the most innovative products, the most innovative services, because at times people forget that IBM is a supplier also. And we have to look at our supply chain and bring in those companies who are providing us that innovation, that technology, that value add. And I would say, look, as a WBE also, look at the organizations such as WeConnect. You want to look at it from a company standpoint, who are those companies that you're going to go after? And those companies have to be more inclusive from a supply chain standpoint. I would say the diverse-owned business or women-owned businesses have to associate with NGOs such as WeBank and as WeConnect, because think about it. When you join or when you register, you're not only a local company, but you are a worldwide company. And if you're on the internet, you are worldwide, and you want to get your product out. You want to get the communications out on the things that you're doing, and then also look at it from a local governmental standpoint, because I do agree with those statements that have been made. In most countries, the government is the largest procurer of all products or services. And there has to be some type of mandates, and I'll take it from as we're doing in the U.S. The U.S. government has requirements, and the requirements are for, the key word is small, because they want to grow small businesses. It's small woman-owned, which would be certified women-owned businesses, small disadvantaged business, which are really minority-owned businesses. So the government has mandates for companies who are doing business with them. So every business in the U.S., or for a proposal that they have that's over 750,000 U.S. dollars, they have to have a small business component of it. And that's how you get those small women-owned businesses in the governmental sector. You have them from a requirement standpoint, you grow them, and then they can grow and diversify. And the last point I will make is, as you are growing, ensure that you are not dependent upon one particular customer. no matter if that is a private company or the government, you want to diversify so that if a hiccup happens, your business continue to grow. So, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Elizabeth.
Wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you, Michael, very much for sharing the how-to. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? I would love to ask the woman business owner, our representative, Dr. Bader, based on your experience, what's your vision for women as business owners in the UAE? What are some things that you've done that have helped you to grow your business and to reach the success that you've achieved throughout the region? Dr. Bader?
Yeah, thank you. Well, surely we do have great potential here, and simply because of the smaller contribution that we have so far. So the potential is really enormous. And like the statistics that you've mentioned, we do have amazing talents in terms of female. So a couple of points I would say: to be courageous, to be more risk taker. And that applies both, if you want to open your own business or if you want to have a leadership role within corporate. Statistics shows, for example, that if we have a vacancy, a man that thinks he can do 60% of the job will apply fully hearted, and that they can, really present themselves strongly and believe in it, versus a woman wouldn't do this unless if she's 100% or 120% sure that she can do it. The same thing apply for, starting your own business. There are, nowadays, it's much easier than when I started. Nowadays, the government, it's one of the most leading governments where we have 50% of the contribution, if not even more, in the parliament that is coming from diversified female, younger generation, different type of slates that always provides much more wealth to, to bring to the table, from innovation part, from problem solving, from, inclusion, from all aspects. And the key to success for any SME is always, the basic three elements, which is access to finance, access to, if you will, talent, HR, how do I run my business, how do I build my leadership, and the access to the right network. And, I agree with all what have been said about networks. And like Mr. Ambassador mentioned, we had enough of network. Let's get into action to some extent. But also in terms of the networking, when I started, I tried for so many times to find organization where I can register with them as a female-owned business. And I found zillions in the States, but all of them were national, and nothing is related to this part of the world, for example. So we need more accessibility to things like that. And to Michael, I would say, since you represent, the Fortune 500 companies, it will be great if, scaling down, if you will, those kind of processes that you have for inclusion from a procurement point of view to the region. Because in many cases, I've been into contacts with organizations that I know, for example, in the States, they do have a specific practice for that, but nobody is aware about it here. And, there is no way that we can break through the barrier just to be included. And, one of the ideas that I always think about is quota. I used to hate quota when I was younger because I thought it was, disrespectful for us as female that we just need to be added for the number's sake. However, quota is a practical way of doing things. And, I think we need to have quota in both, in terms of recruiting for leadership roles, as well as for SMEs to engage with organizations, be it, public, private, in all aspects, because that is the tool that will enable women to have access and to be visible and to engage. But then by the end of the day, the choice is purely should be for the most credible, for the most qualified to do the job. So quota is good for, opening the door, but it shouldn't be at all the deciding factor in terms of selection, in my opinion. And nowadays, with how the world is evolving, I think we do have more and more opportunities for female across the globe, but more so in the whole Middle East, especially now that we can work out of home, the digital transformation that we have. So regardless if you're a mother, if you're pregnant, if you have kids, it doesn't matter. You can do it. There are so many different platforms that is enabling us, empowering us to do more. And we just need to believe in ourselves and find the right resources, like what we've heard and learned about today, and try to use that. So that's it, how I see it. And I hope, we will be seeing more and more SMEs-led women here in UAE and in the region.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Bader. I'm seeing that we have a lot of questions in the chat. So we would love to invite all of you to please share your questions, your experience, so that we can have an interactive conversation for the next few minutes. I do see a lot of questions having to do with access to finance or investment. There's a new report out by the Council on Scaling Women-Owned Businesses that actually makes the linkages between access to markets and access to finance, and how important it is for women to come to the table with contracts or with clients, and it makes it so much easier for them to get investment from investors or to get a loan from a bank. And so there is a direct linkage between organic growth through sales and through access to finance. And just as you said, Dr. Bader, these are all intimately linked with all the things that have been mentioned by our other panel experts on capacity development. Ambassador, I know that you have been working very closely with various agencies throughout the UAE, including in Abu Dhabi, for example, and audio has done a lot in the investment space and looking to see what could be done for inclusion. And so just wanted to know if you had any thoughts about those linkages.
I don't have any specific about audio themselves, except to say that there is a tremendous amount of both anticipation and excitement about what the next step should be. And you brought up a very interesting point in where does the capital come from? I think there are a number of models and in terms of how women progress. The need for capital is very important, but what comes first, capital or the contract? And at least in my experience, I haven't seen very many large companies be willing to give out meaningful contracts to startups, to businesses that are small and haven't been proven. Even majority businesses, when they go to a new client, have to walk up a scale. You're not going to be entrusted the very first contract with something large or strategic or important. And so how you approach each one of your customers has a lot to do with what kind of service, how big is the contract, how critical is it to the client. Do you need a partner to establish credibility, to ensure success? These are all questions that make this a difficult journey because there is no one standard model for every single little company or women-owned company that's out there. And so this is where this organization, certification, networking, partnering, I believe, is so critical to the success of the entire effort. And like I said in the beginning, each one will have a little different twist to it, depending upon the industry, the size and experience of the women-owned business, the amount of capital that's needed. There are so many variables that it's almost impossible at a conference like this to set some standard out that everyone can follow. And that's why these organizations, conferences, and partnerships are so vitally important. Over.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think you made some, really important comments as it relates to the desire of businesses that are small to grow and their ability to grow because they don't have a long track record. And so how can we as a community, based on all the things that we spend our money on, products and services, whether it's the large corporations, the governments, or the women business owners themselves, how do we all along that value chain leverage our purchasing power to create opportunities for sales and a track record and experience? And how do we get women into value chains along that value chain in a place that makes sense. It might be, as you said, a subcontractor or a sub to a sub to a sub. So it might be, a very small contract, but then you can prove your experience and work your way up along that value chain. So I think that's a really important point about being realistic of how sales actually happen in the world. And we did get a question specific for Michael Robinson wanting to know, could you share a supplier diversity success story or an achievement, and how has that evolved over the years? Michael?
Yes. As I had mentioned, our program has been in effect since 1968, and there are numerous stories that I could tell. I won't give out the supplier's name because I don't have approval for that, but I can talk about there were a WBE or woman-owned business who started with us, and I'll look at it from two perspectives, who started with us in the U.S., and they had a small amount of business. And just as it had been stated before, once you join or become a supplier, you do have to prove yourself. You have to prove that you're reliable, that you can provide the product and or service when needed, and you can meet the requirements. You have the quality. Those are critical, because if you can't do those, you won't be able to grow with that business. But the business came in, the woman-owned business came into IBM, and they came in as a subcontractor. They came in as initially a second tier, which meant they weren't a direct supplier to us. They were a supplier to one of our prime suppliers. But over time, that supplier grew. They moved from the U.S. to Canada, from Canada to Eastern and Western Europe. Now they are in the Middle East, and they're in China also. So over time, they grew with us. They understood our strategy, and they did the same thing that Fortune 500 companies do. They go to where the business is located, to where their customers are growing. And that's what that supplier did with us. Now, I'll look at it the other way. We have some suppliers who started out with us in South Africa. And from South Africa, she has grown into several other countries on the African continent. And now she is looking into Europe also and providing us services in that area. So as I mentioned before, we operate in 170 countries, and we do look for suppliers in each and every one of those countries. And that's why, and I keep going back, and you've heard people talk about networking and identifying yourself. That's why it's great to belong to an organization such as We Connect, because number one, they will help you with those skills. They will help you with networking. They will help you with meeting those corporations such as IBM and other corporations that you can present your story to. And the key thing that each and every one of you want to do is to be given the opportunity to participate in the proposal process. There are going to be some you're going to win, and there are going to be some you're going to lose. That is the nature of business. But the key thing you have to learn is, for any proposal that you lose, go back and ask why. And that's an issue that a lot of companies don't do. If they lose a proposal, they don't go back and say, why? Why did I lose? So that they can learn, and the next time they can rectify that issue that they had so that they could even be better. So thank you, Elizabeth.
Fantastic as always, Michael. These are little bits of gold, gold dust that you're sharing with all of us. I would love to turn over to you, Dr. Bader. We have, many questions from what appear to be women-owned businesses wanting to know how do they access networks? How do they access financing? How do they get the word out about their business? And you have a lot of experience with getting the word out about your offerings and the value that you provide. I don't know if you've tapped into investment or working with banks, but I think there is a lot of curiosity if the UAE government or private sector provide opportunities for women to access finance or business opportunities. So Dr. Bader would love your advice and guidance.
Thank you. Unfortunately, in my experience, in my journey, we didn't have access to finance. So everything has been really done by being self-independent, which made it much harder, as you can imagine. However, nowadays, there are so many initiatives in terms of the government that's taking as well as the private sector. I don't know about specific, if you will, avenues that are now active and that are catered specifically for women, but I knew that there has been several discussions about supporting female. I tried actually during the pandemic to reach out and find out if there is anything that can support our cash flow during, the crisis that we are in. But I did not find, and I'm sure there must be some organizations, but we don't know. So one of the things that I think will make the PPP much more successful is awareness. So, like the people that are asking the questions, if there's any entity or any program out there, please make it visible, promote it, market it. It should be in a certain area where somebody can go and know about it. So from my own experience, there could be some support system that I am not aware of. In terms of networking, it's super essential and very important, but I always say it has to be based on the initial intent. What are the specific objectives of this network? So I mean, we need to be very selective in terms of what network we want to be associated with. It's not just about collecting business cards and put them on your desk. It's about the quality and what is this network going to contribute to me as an individual by the end of the day. And there are endless, if you will, organizations like yourself that I just came to learn about, where you have specific objectives. It's not just about having women, connecting together, but there are much more objectives that will convert into tangible outcome and results. And this is what we really need. And of course, I mean, it has to be inclusive. So like, the good network should be very selective in terms of qualifying the participants that are going to be as part of this network. So this is how you can ensure that you have certain qualities by the end of the day. There has been so many networks that I've participated in that I just found them waste of time. If I want to go and have a chat with my friends over a cup of coffee, I can do it. I don't have to do it as business in a way. However, once you are into such a network, it's very important for this network to have both angles, the professional part and the softer part, the human being part. So it will be good to have the formal training, and all the right processes in place, but also to have ability to network with one another in a social way. But once we have the right basis, this will make things much easier. The other thing that I say, we've engaged with several accelerators, and we're working more and more on that, because one of the main elements that startups fail is because they are not able to hire and find and build the right leadership team. So we've been trying to work with accelerators to bridge that gap, to help them in terms of their training, in terms of the HR aspect. How do I select? How do I build? How do I put the right processes in place, as well as to work on specific programs that are user-friendly, budget-friendly, that can enable startups when they have very, very much of a small budget. And we all know, for example, that for women versus men, when you start up, there are so many statistics by BCG and others that for usually the average amount of money that a female can generate is in the range of 50,000 US. And I'm talking about the most developed country, which is the US, versus 1 million average per male. So just imagine, from the beginning, when we're starting the journey, you have this unfair, if you will, accessibility to finances that can support you. And there are so many statistics that shows if we have equal participation, equity in terms of women and men entrepreneurs, how this will impact on the economy. So, I mean, I do appreciate the corporate social aspects of it. But the way how I look at things, it's pure business imperative. It does really have the right return on investment when you put more diversified slates into your boards, into your leadership team, into your SMEs, when you allow more engagement with other than the classical. And it's endless, the statistic that we have, how much this will convert into higher GDPs, into better dividends for stakeholders, etc.
Thank you, Dr. Bader. Lots of words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing your personal experience. I know it's very challenging to start and grow a business for anyone, but in particular for women and other underutilized groups, it can be even more challenging. So I know we only have a few minutes left. This has been a very fast-paced and I think super interesting conversation. I know we didn't get to all of the questions from the participants, but we will work hard to do follow-ups after this. Ambassador, do you happen to have, in a minute, any other words of wisdom you want to share with us, words of encouragement?
Of conferences and webinar. There you go. Can you hear me now? I suppose you can. I just heard I was unmuted. The critical part is you need to do a lot more of these. The questions out there point out to the diversity, the sophistication, the number of unknowns that are out there. And in order to be able to educate women-owned businesses sufficiently to take advantage of this emerging opportunity is critical with success. And so I would say the more of these that you can do, and perhaps make them a bit longer, and give a lot more opportunity to questions and answers, I think that's where the real value comes in. As much as I appreciated giving my opening statement, I think I can provide more value in the future by answering specific questions and how my experience can perhaps lead to unlocking some of the answers that your participants are looking for. Over.
Thank you, Ambassador. We are going to be taking you up on that because I know that I have lots of questions for you and I'm certain everyone else does too. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. That's a really big deal given how very busy you are. So thank you for sharing. Michael Robinson, do you have any closing thoughts to share with us?
Hi, Elizabeth. I was waiting till the unmuted sound direction came. We've talked about, and everyone knows, the financials involved and cash flow involved. And that's an area that a lot of times we center on when talking about women-owned businesses, diverse-owned businesses, small business in general. The other thing that I would point out is just as valuable as cash flow, the second leading cause of failure has been found to be having a strategic direction, both long-term and short-term strategy. I'm old enough to remember that if you wanted to go from one part of the country to another, you had to have a map. And if you didn't have a map or you didn't have directions, because everybody has it in the GPS in their phones now, you would get lost. And that is a critical need for businesses and small businesses today. Yes, be concerned about cash flow, but on that same token, have your short-term strategic directions and your long-term. Understand where you're going, modify that, and make sure everyone in your business is aware of it, they're on board, and they're following you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. We're at time. Dr. Bader, do you have one word to summarize everything? One word of encouragement. I think if I were to summarize it for you, what is it? Is it passion or something else? Persistent?
Yeah, I was sure. I mean, passion, but also I would say be very open for criticism and feedback. It's extremely important to learn and ask the question and to know what needs to be modified and be better. Try to tailor-made your services to be of high quality, but matching each and every unique client's needs.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Bader. Let me turn it over quickly to the Ministry of the Economy, our host, AIM. Thank you very much for hosting all of us. Karen, just want a quick thank you from all of us for being such a leader in this space. It's an honor to get to partner with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Elizabeth. Really, the session today really empowered me more. Thank you to all our panel of experts for joining us today and taking time from their schedule and sharing their thoughts and perspective with us. I would like to thank once again our multilateral partner, Islamic Corporation, for the development of the private sector, and Etihad Credit Insurance for sponsoring this webinar. Sharing their questions. The link to today's webinar video and presentation will be sent to you via email. And we are also conducting a short survey to get your feedback on today's webinar. So the link to the survey will be shared with you via the chat and via email. To register for our next webinar scheduled for the 27th of July 20, please visit our website, www.aimcongress.com/webinars. And also follow us on our social media channel to keep yourself updated. Thank you once again. Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth. Thank you to all our panelists. We look forward to seeing you on 27th of July. Bye for now.